And in the middle, and
Yeah.
I won't look at anybody else, so we keep one angle. We're good?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Okay. Go ahead. You want me to just start with what time this all started? And
Yeah,
go from there?
could you tell us, basically, how did you guys get the call and how did this develop?
We received a call from the bus transfer station about 12:37 that a male was on a Jefferson Lines bus with a hostage. He had a firearm and that he was also indicating that he had some kind of an explosive device.
And this bus, where was it coming from? Where was it going? And how did it go?
Well, the bus came from Missoula immediately before it got to Butte. As I'm understanding, there were only 2 passengers on the bus as well as the driver. So when the bus got to Butte, the suspect indicated that he wanted the bus driver to take him to the courthouse. He indicated he had a gun and told the driver that he wanted to go to the courthouse. The driver didn't take him to the courthouse. He took him to the area just east of the bus transfer station, and that's when the suspect said that he again had an explosive and that nobody was getting off the bus. About that same time, apparently the second individual on the bus, who was later the hostage, came out of the restroom. The suspect turned to that person and pointed the gun at him at the rear of the bus and said, "Go to the back of the bus." And at that time, the driver was able to get off the bus, and he was able to get off the bus. And in the bus driver he really started the success of the whole thing, because he got off the bus, went to the back of the bus and disabled it so that we were not going to have to deal with the bus that would go mobile. So he flipped some switches at the back of the bus and turned off the ability for the bus to move. So from there on out, everything was stationary, and so the driver did an outstanding job. 1, not taking the guy to the courthouse, and 2, disabling the bus right there where the whole incident took place.
Did the suspect say why he wanted to go to the courthouse?
He didn't indicate why he wanted to go to the courthouse that I'm aware of. He did later, when he was speaking with our negotiators, indicate that he had a number of grievances with the society as a rule. He wanted to speak to Ryan Zinke at one time. He wanted to speak to the governor at one time. He didn't really have any demands other than the food that we got him and the water that we eventually got him, and the phones to keep the negotiations going. But he didn't really have any other demands other than he wanted to tell his story to the public, and he felt this was a way to get his story out. There was kind of a disjointed rambling about the Department of Family Services, the Department of Corrections, those issues that he was having with family. No real logic to what he was talking to our negotiators about.
Did you guys kind of realized during this negotiation that you may be dealing with somebody with some mental issues, and how did this come?
Yeah, the negotiators did not feel that he was under the influence of any kind of drugs or alcohol. They felt that he was probably suffered some paranoia or some mental health issues, and so they weren't able to really come up with a real plan of attack other than to let this guy vent and then try to work in some of our hopes that we would get him to surrender and release the hostage.
Has he been arrested before, charged with other crimes?
You know, he doesn't have a real lengthy criminal record that we can see at this point. He is a 52-year-old male from Spokane, Washington. The driver was also a 52-year-old male who is based in Billings, and the hostage is a 45-year-old male who lives here in Butte.
Can you identify the suspect now?
Can't identify the suspect yet. He's not charged with anything yet. He's on an investigative hold at this time. Our detectives, as well as the county attorney, will get together later today, get the charges that are appropriate given the severity of this incident together, and then we'll charge him later today.
Do you know how many people were on the bus at the time?
As far as we know, I'm told it was just one passenger who was later the hostage, the suspect, and the bus driver were all the people who came from the Billings. Now, there were a bunch of people in the bus transfer station when I got there that I thought might have gotten off the bus, but it does not appear that there were any other people on the bus other than the driver, the hostage, and the suspect.
And you guys evacuated the transfer station to, keep everyone safe there.
Yeah, once we got the situation with the bus figured out, there was a person on the bus with a firearm and potentially an explosive device. Then we started evacuating the area. So when you get to the scene of a hostage situation, there's a kind of a hierarchy of our priorities. Number one, we want to make sure that the general public's not in danger, so we can isolate and contain the incident. Secondly, we want to try and free the hostage safely. And then third, we want to do everything we can to avoid officers getting hurt. And then finally, if we can take the suspect into custody without injury, that's the four priorities we have in those situations. If you can get to those four boxes checked, you're pretty fortunate.
I know some people were like, at first, Harrison was still open to traffic. Some people were wondering why wasn't it closed down earlier. I guess when did you all decide that?
Well, the thing is, it takes a long time to try and get the situation figured out, and then get the logistics of who's going to shut down Harrison Avenue is a busy street, so we have to figure out who's going to shut it down, and then we need to deal with the immediate threat first, and then we can kind of expand out when we have the incident contained. So then we can start working on blocking streets and evacuating bus shelter and those kind of things. But it took longer than we would like, but by the same token, we have to deal with the immediate threat, and that was the person on the bus with the hostage.
And they, you had the hostage, at one point, the hostage was released. Could you tell us how that transpired? How were you able to get this, how was this one hostage able to be released?
Yeah, one of the demands, the first demand the suspect had was that he wanted some food brought to the bus and a phone. Because his phone was losing its charge, and he was afraid that he was going to lose contact with us, and that's obviously something we were concerned with too. So we arranged to bring some food with a phone and a charger to him. He wanted us to throw it back to him he wanted us to throw it back farther into the rear of the bus. We didn't want to do that, so what we did was we set the food on the step of the bus, and so there had to be some movement in the bus. If they were going to come and get the food, we wanted to have to at least make an effort to come out from where they were, so we could get some information, if nothing else, on what the situation of the bus was. So as the suspect and the hostage were talking about it, they were trying to figure out how to get up to the food. The hostage was able to give the suspect a shove and then run out the door of the bus. He stepped right over the food and came out of the bus, and then was grabbed by our tactical team members, and we had to make sure that he wasn't a suspect and he wasn't wired up with some kind of explosive or armed. So we had to do that first, and then he was taken to our command post and debriefed by detectives about what was going on the bus and what he'd seen and what the situation was.
And he wasn't injured or anything?
No, the hostage was not injured at all.
So he seemed like he actually kind of escaped himself by just...
Yeah, while they were trying to debate on how to get the food that we didn't throw back to him like he wanted, that's when he was able to get some space between him and the suspect and give him a shove and then jump out of the bus and run for safety.
And I noticed that the suspect came up, got the food. He looked like he might have had a gun on him. Was he threatening?
Yeah, he came up when he got that bag. He had a pistol to his head, and then if you look in the photo that I think the Standard took, he's got some kind of a device in his hand, and he's got a satchel slung over his shoulder. That he had a device in his hand, and he also had some wires from whatever kind of a device it was into this satchel. So that's what he indicated was the explosive device. He had some explosives in the bag and a detonator in his hand.
And some question, once the hostage was out, people were questioning why did you guys seem to take you waited it out? Why was it decided not to go into the bus? What was the decision at this point?
My decision at that point was once the hostage is out of the bus, then the time and distance is on our side. And so what we were trying to do then was determine we were looking through optics, trying to determine how heavy the bag was to see if we could get an estimate on volume of explosives would be in the bag. If he had a bag that size full of explosives, we were considering the blast radius of that device to be considerable. And so I didn't want to put anybody in there, given the fact that the only person in danger at that point was the suspect. So we kind of backed off and covered him with our sniper positions, so that he wasn't going to be able to get off the bus and advance toward anyone, but at that point time was on our side. So we continued to negotiate with him. We talked with Missoula County and Missoula City combined EOD team was there, as well as Lewis and Clark County's EOD team. We talked to some of the explosives experts trying to determine, what size of explosives he might have, and they were able to set up a robot and get us a look at the bag, as well as some of our snipers could see. At some point later on in the night, he started digging through those bags, and he was taking some things out of them, toiletries and some things that we didn't think that if he did have explosives, it wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be 20 pounds. It was going to be a relatively small explosive device, like a pipe bomb or something. And so that was when I decided that was probably safe for us to approach and try to inject some chemical agents into the bus and bring the situation to an end.
Good. And how did that happen? How did you bring this to an end?
Well, we attempted an explosive breach on the window at the rear of the bus that initially failed, and then we fired some projectiles with oleoresin caps that come into the bus, which is pepper spray basically, and then we were able to breach enough of the window to put a CS grenade, which is tear gas, into the back of the bus, and the plan was to have that gas infiltrate the bus, moving from the back to the front, and force him out the door of the bus. I think he was probably stunned by the loud crash at the beginning of the operation. He left the gun in the bus, and then of course the OC-10 and the tear gas started taking effect on him and pushed him right out the front of the bus, where he was given verbal commands to take off his clothes so we could determine whether he had anything wired to him or not, and he did. He threw the detonator out, which he said was a detonator, turned out to be a cell phone that was wired with a couple batteries, and then into a backpack, but there were no explosives in the backpack. So once we had him where he didn't have any clothing or any backpack or anything that could contain an explosive, then he was taken into custody. Our officers then backed off, and we let Missoula County and Lewis and Clark County and the Missoula City combined explosive ordnance team take a look at the bag that was outside the bus with an x-ray, and then they went inside the bus and x-rayed what he had inside the bus and determined that there were no explosives on the bus. The weapon was a 380 semi-automatic handgun that was loaded, that he had left on the floor of the bus when this whole operation started. Again, I think he was stunned by the loud bang, and he left the gun on the floor and came out. So we're fortunate he didn't come out with any explosives or a firearm, and the incident ended the way it did. Like I said, if you can check keep the public safe, get the hostage off the bus, keep the officer safe, and then finally take the suspect into custody without anybody getting hurt, then if you can check all those boxes, it's pretty successful.
So no officers, no one was injured in the whole thing?
Nobody was injured in the whole incident. We did damage the windows on the bus and filled the bus up with chemical agents, so the bus will have to be decontaminated by the bus company before it's in service, but nobody, that's the only damage that we had.
That's why it was being towed away. It was probably
They can't drive it because it'll stir up all those chemical agents in it.
And well, this whole situation, you guys train for situations like this, active shooters and stuff. How difficult and challenging was this particular situation?
Well, anytime you have a guy who's got a hostage, a firearm, he says he has explosives, that's a bad situation. But then you put it into a tubular structure or vehicle like a bus or an aircraft, it presents a whole bunch of tactical challenges that make things slow down considerably. And so the big thing was, isolating the incident, number one, and the driver helped us tremendously with his actions at the start of this thing. Not a lot of people are going to think that clearly to jump off the bus and disable it. Had he been able to get that bus mobile, we had a whole different situation. But fortunately, the driver was thinking on his feet and disabled the bus. So then we have an isolated incident. So then we can take some time, and once the hostage got off, then things slowed down considerably, and time and distance are on our side at that point. So, but it presents a lot of tactical challenges anytime you're dealing with somebody that's armed, especially with a hostage, and then throw in a tubular bus or an aircraft or something like that. It's tubular assaults or tubular operations are tactical challenges given any situation.
How is the driver, the bus driver?
Bus driver's fine. He was in the command post with us from the start to the finish. We had to use his expertise because he had the knowledge of the bus and how to open there's an emergency door at the back of the bus that it's not easy to open, so we had to have him explain to us that there's a couple of different levers to pull and handles to pull to get that open. He knew how the bus operated, so if we needed some consultation about what we wanted to do with the bus, he was there for us. So he did a great job with disabling the bus and then helping us throughout the incident. So he's certainly one of the heroes of this whole thing.
Is the hostage still in custody, or?
The hostage was not taken into custody. The hostage was released after he was debriefed by the detectives.
Okay. Anything you want to add about how your officers handled the situation?
Well, you train and train and train in hopes that you never have to use this kind of training, but unfortunately we did, and it worked, and it's kind of sobering to look at, when you go out there and train so long and so often, you don't, hopefully you never get to use it, but in this case it did, it worked, and we had the highly skilled personnel and the equipment to pull off the operation, and we got a couple breaks where the driver was thinking on his feet and disabled the bus, and I can't say enough about the resources that were provided to us. Public Works set up some barricades for us. The Montana Highway Patrol was on scene helping us with calls, because the one thing you have to consider when you have an incident unfolding like this is the rest of the incidents around the county don't stop. We still have the routine incidents or potentially another incident. So Highway Patrol was a tremendous help with taking accidents and responding to calls while we were dealing with this situation. We had the U.S. Marshals were in town. They were able to assist us in evacuating the bus shelter and helping us with some of the folks that were off to the west. ATF was on scene in case there was some kind of explosive device. The FBI was on scene. They had this incident drawn on into today. We probably would have had the FBI regional TAC team here that based in Salt Lake. They would have probably been here by now. So you have to start looking down the road because it's cold, people are getting hungry, people are getting tired, and you don't want to take your tactical team or anybody past where they're physically not able to do what you're asking them to do. So we had Lewis and Clark County team was on their way. Their tactical team was on their way. They would have been on scene at 11 o'clock. Gallatin County offered their tactical team, so they were next up on the rotation. Missoula County offered their tactical team as well as their armored vehicle so we were having some resources that had this thing drawn out any longer, we would have some ability to replace tactical team members and some protective vehicles to approach the bus and just the community outpouring. We got food donated from a number of groups that were brought into the department, and Butte's a special place, and it couldn't have ended any better than it did, but it's certainly a way bigger operation, just the police department. It's a community-wide effort, and that's why we live in Butte.
Can you talk with us a little bit more about the negotiating process? What strategy did your officers use in talking to this guy?
Well, the biggest obstacle is to get a suspect to talk to the negotiator. So we had a couple of negotiators that were working on trying to build rapport with the suspect. We had some issues. His phone died. Then we did supply him with a phone, and that phone died. But we did supply him with a cord to charge that phone. But the bus, as it was disabled, didn't have the charging ports of the bus wouldn't charge the phone. So we had to get him a third phone. And so there were some times where we weren't in contact with him. There were some times where he hung up and didn't really want to talk to us. So the big thing is just trying to build rapport and keep him talking. As long as we're talking, then we feel like we have a reasonable chance to end the situation. But he kind of continued through the same story several times about just grievances he had, basically his physical health. There was some conspiracy type theories that he had out that people were after him, and some real disjointed thoughts that probably indicate that he has some kind of mental situation going on. His demand was really just to get his story out there and his grievances, but there were multiple, really disjointed, not very organized, and so we weren't making a lot of progress other than the fact that he was talking to our negotiator. So we were, as long as that was going on, we felt that we had a chance to resolve it peacefully, and we also, once we developed the information that looked like if he did have an explosive device, it was relatively small, and we could see that he was distracted, looking to the front of the bus, and that's when I determined that we'd make an effort to try and end it with the chemical agents, and unfortunately it worked out.
What potential charges could the suspect face?
Well, definitely 2 counts of assault with a weapon, one on the driver and one on the hostage. Probably unlawful restraint for attempting it or not allowing him to leave the bus. That's 2 counts there, and then probably criminal endangerment for putting the tactical team and the other officers at the scene in danger. So there'll probably be multiple counts of criminal endangerment as well. So that's just for starters. That's the ones that come to mind. But like I said, our investigators will work with the county attorney to try and determine the number of charges and which charges are applicable.
Perfect. Good.
I think that'll do it. Thank you,
Good.
Sheriff.
Yeah, thank you.